The importance of this testimony, you might ask, what importance does this have? How can we just say this person, that person said? Who are they? What authority do they have to say that the Gospels were indeed written by those to whom they were said to have been written? The witnesses named above were men of authority holding public positions. They are cultured and learned men, speaking not as private individuals only, but as recognized representatives of large communities. Hello, welcome to Conferences on the True Religion. I'm your host, Father John Okerolu. This is episode 6 of these conferences. In the last episode, episode 5, we spoke about the character of the sacred writers, that is to say, those who wrote the three or the four gospels, the three synoptic gospels, and the last gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Some people say various religions, they say that their religion, the books of their religion are sacred, but they fail to ask, how did this book come about? Who wrote them? Because of course, God cannot come down from heaven to write a book, because God is spirit. He could do so, but usually he makes use of secondary causes, whereby he inspires the hearts and the wills of men to commit certain things to writing that he himself has wanted. Such he did during after his coming of the Son. He made four people to commit to writing the words, the deeds, and the actions of his Son. These four people are, as we have seen, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Today we shall find out the genuineness of these documents. In order to establish the historical worth of the Gospels, we proceed in exactly the same way as we would prove any book of history. We will proceed by demonstrating that the Gospels are genuine, that the authors are trustworthy, that the documents are complete. Today we shall analyze the first, that the Gospels are genuine. A historical document is genuine when it is written by the author whose name it bears. Example, the Gallic Wars by Julius Caesar. If the document is anonymous, it is sufficient to prove that it was written about the time to which it was attributed. Now the question presently is to find out whether John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke wrote the Gospels themselves. We probe the point first from the evidence of history, secondly, from the evidence of the documents themselves. It is universally accepted from the time of after Christ's ascension that the Gospels were indeed written by those to whom they said they were written. This testimony of authoritative witnesses have been proven uninterruptedly from the very beginning time, going back century by century from our own days to the first days of Christianity. We find the documents in existence in every age and accepted as genuine documents written by the authors named. This testimony extends as far back as the middle of the first century to within a few years of the death of Christ. We'll examine some words of early reputable churchmen. In the year 253 or 258, Origen says he appeals to the traditional consent of the Universal Christian Church as a proof that the sacred scripture, the Gospels, were indeed written by those to whom they said they were written. Tertullian, who lived about 220, in defending Christianity against Marcion, says that John and Matthew recorded the faith as apostles from the apostles, and Luke and Mark recorded the faith from the words of the apostles. St. Irenaeus, who died about 202, says, he quotes the Gospels about 400 times, giving these quotations as the testimony of the apostles and the disciples against heretics of his age. St. Ignatius the Martyr, who died about 107, gives ample testimony that the Gospels are genuine. There are so many authors we can go on in a long series who lived during the time of the apostles or of their disciples, that is their successors, who testify that the Gospels were indeed written by those to whom they said they were written. The importance of this testimony, you might ask, what importance does this have? How can we just say this person, that person said? Who are they? What authority do they have to say that the Gospels were indeed written by those to whom they were said to have been written? The witnesses named above were men of authority holding public positions. They are cultured and learned men, speaking not as private individuals only, but as recognized representatives of large communities. Again, the documents to which they bear witness are not private documents dealing with matters of little moment, but public documents containing the fundamentals of the Christian religion. It would be impossible to make a mistake about the authorship of such public and universally known and important documents, especially since many of the witnesses cited above were very close, as I have said, to the authors themselves, or at least to their immediate disciples. Even enemies themselves have testified to the authenticity of what is contained in the Gospels. For instance, the Jews and pagans were well acquainted with the Gospels, and in their attacks upon Christianity, they quoted these documents. Celsus, in the 2nd century, is an example. Now it is clear that the strongest argument the enemies of Christianity could bring forward would be the proof that the source documents of Christianity were not genuine but spurious, were not history but myths or legends. And yet, despite all their investigations, bitter enemies of Christianity like Celsus, Marcion, and Valentinian of the 2nd century, and Basilides, who died in 130 AD, expressly accept the Gospels as genuine documents. Thus, Irenaeus in the 2nd century could write, such agreement exists with regard to the Gospels that the very heretics themselves testify to them, and in fact, each heretic attempts to prove his false doctrine from the Gospels. The evidence of the Gospels or the documents themselves. From the documents, we can also prove its genuineness. Any sincere examination of the Gospels will convince even the most hostile critics that these documents were written by the men named as the authors, or at the very least, that the documents were written about the time of Christ. This internal evidence of the documents rests on the circumstances described in the narratives, the exact knowledge of time, place, and customs, all responding with such accuracy to the times of Christ as to force the conclusion that these documents were written by eyewitnesses or men who had their facts directly from eyewitnesses. Later writers could not possibly have described events with such intimate personal touches and accuracy. Lastly, the documents contain prophecies of the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple, but there is no word anywhere there telling us that these prophecies were fulfilled. John, who wrote after the other evangelists, by implication mentions the fulfillment of these prophecies, as we should expect of such a comparatively late document. But the silence of the other writers on a matter which would be a striking proof of the claims of Christ leads us to the conclusion that the documents containing the prophecies were published before the destruction of Jerusalem, that is, before the year 70 AD. This date brings the writers to the time of Christ and his immediate disciples. The next, we shall consider the trustworthiness of the authors. May God bless you.